down to business.
When he drinks, he thinks.
That's the nectar of the gods, baby.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the #1 liquid-fueled, liquid-lubricated show on the interwebs. This is the Whiskey Musings Broadcast. And I just noticed that my transition on that last switch didn't go the way it was supposed to go. All right, I'll have to mess with that later and fix it. Hello, everyone. This is 2023, the first show of the year. I hope that your New Year's Eve was plenty awesome. I know mine pretty much was. I had a 3-hour show, first time for me. Initial feedback from everybody is telling me that it was actually done quite well. So I thank you for that. I thank you for those who joined and for those who may have been watching afterward and took a look at it. I do appreciate it. All right. So obviously, we got to talk a little bit about what's going on in the House of Representatives. In fact, they are supposed to be reconvening right now to have another vote, or possibly make a motion to adjourn for the day. I don't know, but one or the other. But anyway, we'll have to kind of see what's happening with that. I have got a ton of other articles and stuff to show you. So this is going to be a jam-packed show, as well as a couple of cute kitties for tonight's Pet of the Week. Yeah, so let's go ahead and just get started. But first, I want to show you, this is a new whiskey for me. I actually got it during our family's little white elephant gift thing that we do. And so this is Westland American Single Malt Whiskey. And I'm going to tell you, this has got notes and tones that are similar to my Redbreast, but has a sharper bite at the end for it. So it's a good whiskey. I'm not going to deny that. It's good whiskey. I don't know if I would have necessarily seen it around, but realistically, I mean, it's in the top 5. I'll give it that, but it's not on the #1 list. So anyway. I see a lot of the regulars are showing up over on the Rumble chat. So do me a favor, if you can, head on over to Rumble really quickly and sign up if you haven't already, but sign up, log in, and hop in on the party over there. I know that Facebook's got some people that are there, but it's not all that active, as well as Twitch. I've got, I think, 10 followers over on Twitch. So, just head on over to Rumble, join the party. That seems to be where everything's at. Otherwise, I do appreciate all of you showing up on YouTube and Facebook and Twitch, and of course, Twitter as well. Got to let everybody know about all of my outlets. Those are my 5. Those are my 5 outlets. So, anyway, okay. Also, I wanted to bring a little bit of a note to you as well. You may or may not know that I am, and let me make sure I see which one this is. Okay. You may or may not know that I am a part owner in a fabulous digital radio station, True Grit Roots Network. And we put together some fantastic compilations, Christmas and things like that over the break, over the holidays. But come on over and check out our Roots music that we have. So come on over and check it out. Go to tgrn.net. That's TGRN for True Grit Roots Network.net. And either download our app, or you can find us on the Live 365 catalog of digital radio stations. You can also now put Live 365 on your Roku, so you can listen to TGRN through the Roku on your television set, as well as through your Alexa app. You can just ask your Alexa unit to play True Grit Roots Network from Live 365. Once again, put in the word from, not on. From is the key. So tell Alexa to play True Grit Roots Network from Live 365. And it'll take her a second to find us. But once she does, then she'll go ahead and start playing the TGRN True Grit Roots Network out of Austin, Texas. And I appreciate that. And I know I know that my partner and partners and DJs and all this other stuff, we've got a bunch of exclusive content and everything else on our digital radio station. You should go and check that out today. Okay, so let's go and get into the show. All right, obviously the talk of the town, is wait. What do I see in the chat here? Redford 1238 was your birthday January 2nd? If it was, happy birthday. I don't know if I'm necessarily going to bore you with singing happy birthday, but there you go. Happy birthday to Redford 1238 over on Rumble. Belated birthday for January 2nd. So that's awesome. Okay, you completed another trip around the sun. That's awesome. All right. So obviously the news of the day and of yesterday was the fact that Kevin McCarthy failed to make Speaker of the House. He needed 218 votes. He got anywhere from 202 down to, I think it was 201 today. It might have been 203 one time yesterday, so on and so forth. And so, yeah, it's just one of those things that it's a process. It's part of the process. If anything, if anybody knows anything about government is all about red tape and process. Everything has to be done per a process. And unfortunately, they can't do anything. They can't do anything until they elect a Speaker of the House, the person in charge. And so all of these people were, coming in, all of the newbies, what they call the freshman representatives, were coming in with all of their families and everything else, expecting, I think, that because of course this is, as soon as the speaker is named, they immediately go into getting people or getting the newbies sworn in once again. And so obviously this is a big deal for these folks. And so they had all of their families and their kids and everything else. They're expecting that it was going to happen that fast. But unfortunately, it didn't. And this is actually not surprising. We've kind of heard about it for the last couple of months, that, the speaker may not have the votes. And there's several conservatives and conservative pundits are all taking different sides on this issue. You've got Mark Levin, who's basically saying, bite the bullet, get rid of it, this crap, and let's get started and actually get things going in the House. You've got Dan Bongino, who's saying, hey, this is what it's all about. And, he pretty much kind of said that he was happy about the situation. I've gone back and forth, and honestly, the reason why I've gone back and forth is because to me, it seems like there's a few concessions that some of the 20 Republicans who are holding out are asking the potential speaker, McCarthy, to make a few concessions. Now, McCarthy has made a bunch of concessions already. But it seems that there's those few holdouts, there's about 4 or 5 of the 20 that are actually trying to, get on committees and subcommittees, according to Mark Levin, and according to Marjorie Taylor Greene. So, a lot of this has to deal with a bunch of political wrangling, which we know happens all the time. Now, that being said, I am not a fan of McCarthy. I don't think he would make a very good speaker because I think because of the fact that he is able to reach across to the Democrats and they're at least willing to listen to him. I don't think he is the type of speaker that we need in this critical juncture in our nation's history. And I do say critical juncture because there is so much going on right now that I'm having a hard time keeping track of all of it. So, honestly, here's a couple of the reasons. Let me go ahead and bring this up. Let me just go ahead and show you this, because here's a couple reasons why the Freedom Caucus and why 20 members of the Freedom Caucus are basically saying that McCarthy is not who they want. And it's basically because of the fact that he declined some of his members' demands. Now, this is according to the Freedom Caucus chair. The Freedom Caucus chair is Representative Scott Perry. And he basically said that the House Freedom Caucus members asked McCarthy to hold votes on a balanced budget, a fair tax act, a Texas border plan, and term limits for members of Congress. But McCarthy refused. And there's a reason why McCarthy refused. And the rumors are, obviously there's a reason. I don't think he would just say no. But the thing about it is that if you notice, balanced budgets, Texas border plans, and term limits are three items in particular that the swampy Republicans are deathly afraid of. And the reason why they're deathly afraid of the balanced budget is because obviously it would hinder their ability to spend all kinds of money like Biden is doing. The Texas border plan, of course, highlights one of the key points that the Biden administration has really had a problem with. And I'm not exactly sure that McCarthy is really all that against that in particular. But the thing about it is that, again, we kind of have a bit of a problem here, because the longer this goes on, the little or the less time they actually have to do some of the things that they really, really want to do and should do. So the longer this continues to go, and I'm kind of in a pickle. I'm kind of in a 6 in one hand, half dozen in the other sort of scenario. I typically say that government being bogged down by all of this stuff is a benefit for the American people. But considering everything that the Republicans are touting that they want to do, I really think that this is not exactly the best position to be in. Also, as much as I don't want McCarthy to be in there, I would rather have like a Jim Jordan as an example. I think Jim Jordan would be great. I actually think Steve Scalise would be good as well. But there's a reason why these people do not want those positions. Jim Jordan has flat out said he doesn't want it. And to be completely clear and honest, Jim Jordan is essentially wanting to go after the FBI. He's been jonesing to go after the FBI and the DOJ and everything else. But honestly, that would be a really good place for him to be, because he seems to be a bulldog when it comes to that kind of thing. In terms of, offering up a different person, they've tried a couple different things, and the guy that they voted on today was sort of an interesting, I would consider out of left field kind of thing. But anyway, the point being is that realistically, all this is doing is bolstering the Democrats. It's making the Democrats happy. And of course, if you're a patriot, you understand that if the liberal Democrats, or the Democrats themselves, or the liberals, or the leftists, whatever terminology you want to use to talk about them, that they, when they're happy, we shouldn't be. And right now they are loving this. And the reason why is because they believe that it's showing that, that the Republicans are not united, which realistically the Republicans never have been. That's actually one of the big things that Democrats have been able to do regardless of their little infighting, regardless of how they feel about certain things and certain people of their party, they all seem to be able to do one thing, and that's unite in their hatred of conservatives, conservatism, Republicans, you name it, anything that is against their ultimate agenda. They seem to have the ability to be able to put aside their differences, and they're able to put it all together, and that's who they, that's what they're going to do. Because even though they may hate each other, they hate us more. They hate conservatives more. They hate Republicans more. And so having that as a common thread helps them to unite in situations like this, like the example that is being shown. There are 212 Democrats in the House. All 212 voted for their guy, Hakeem Jeffries, and they didn't waver one bit. Whereas the Republicans, on the other hand, they kind of had a couple wiffle waffles, a couple changes, things weren't always the same. And obviously McCarthy has lost a couple of votes. One to a person who decided to say that decided that they just wanted to vote present, which essentially means that, hey, I was physically here, but I really don't care one way or the other. And the other one was a person who decided to join because the original Republicans who dissented were numbered at 19, and then all of a sudden they went to 20. So anyway, the point being that I'm making here is that the longer this drags on, the worse it's going to get in terms of things like the time that it's going to take for these committees to actually gather evidence. And one point that Mark Levin brought up, which I didn't even really think about, but if the House Republicans want to go after Nancy Pelosi and all of that for January 6th, the longer they wait to vote for speaker, the less chance they have of sending letters out to people like Joe Biden and the others in the administration, the DHS, etc., for all of them to basically have to maintain their records. Because of the fact that they're not in power yet, they kind of don't have, they don't really have the teeth, let's say, to some of the letters that they've been sending here within the last couple of months. So this is sort of a conundrum. It's, again, I'm kind of split one way or the other. I'm not, I'll be honest with you. I'm watching it. It doesn't really surprise me that this is happening. But at the same time, anyway, that's the thing. Now, a question came into me very late from Outlaw asking why the children were in the house during the votes. And I'm pretty much basically telling you the reason why they were there is because the vote, for the most part, should have been just a procedural issue. Had McCarthy had all 218, it would have just gone through. Everything would have been happy. He would have become the speaker, and they would have jumped immediately to swearing in the new members. And so, as I stated before, just for the preparation and everything else, the kids were there in the house during the vote with the expectation that if the speakership passed, that they would immediately move into swearing in the new members. And, you kind of want your family there and everybody there and so on and so forth. So that's probably the primary reason as to why all of those families were there with the kids and everything else. Now, as far as the public is concerned, if you've watched on C-SPAN, you'll see that there's like an upper gallery, and that upper gallery is open to the public, generally speaking, unless they have a closed door session. So in this particular case, they would allow the public up in the upper regions. But again, most of the time, the election of the Speaker of the House is a procedural thing. This is the first time since, like 1830 something that this has been that big of a deal. So it's been quite a long time since we've had this sort of a situation. And, again, I mean, they've had 2 months to plan this, as Coco Domingue points out, it's crazy because of the fact that you have originally 19 and now 20 Republicans who are attempting to get some specialized rule changes and things like that put into place that McCarthy is essentially, saying I'm not going to do. And so realistically, what you're dealing with is, 20, we'll just count it 20 Republicans who are essentially trying to hold out for something, whatever that something is. And we've heard mixed results or mixed reports that some of them are holding out for, better committee positions, committee chairs, subcommittee chairs, things like that. And then, of course, the 4 items that I mentioned about the balanced budget, the Fair Tax Act, the Texas border plan, and term limits. So, yeah, it's just it's just that kind of a thing. And McCarthy has been quoted as saying, I deserve this. I've been here longer. I deserve this position. And so he's really arrogant because he actually moved into the office of the speaker expecting that it was going to go and just, go through really, really fast. And this time it's not, which I'm wondering if there might be some blowback to the 20 Republicans once McCarthy does get into the speakership slot. And this is another way that McCarthy could save this too, is McCarthy could just withdraw. He could just say, you know what, you guys really don't want me. Fine. I'll just go ahead and withdraw. And, you guys put up something else. But he is not going to do that. He is resigned. He thinks he deserves that spot. He's not one of those types of people who essentially says things like, oh, well, if the people don't want me, or if my colleagues don't want me, then I'm okay with that. No, he's not going to do that. He is going to hang on for dear life to this kind of thing. But the longer this crap, Outlaw put it properly here, pulling a Clinton, assuming that he just gets it because it's my time, which, I suppose you could think that way, but to me, it seems like he's actually making more of a mountain out of a molehill in this particular case than, some of the other things. If he doesn't want to give the concessions, then just say, you know what, I'm done. But it is what it is. However, there are 5 things that are stopping, according to the Washington Examiner. Let me pull this up real quick. There are 5 things that are being held up because of this. And the number 1, obviously, is Joe Biden and the Afghanistan withdrawal, which is, that was seriously a problem. I mean, if you remember back in the Reagan era, you had the Oliver North Iran-Contra scandal. They went through months and months of meetings and, congressional hearings, et cetera, et cetera. So I can just imagine that something like this with Joe Biden and the Afghanistan withdrawal is going to be the same kind of scenario. Then you have also Dr. Anthony Fauci and the COVID-19 pandemic and the handling of it, which again is going to be a bit of a interesting thing to watch investigative wise. And then, of course, there's Hunter Biden and his laptop, which, by the way, I've got a little something on that here in just a little bit. We also have Alejandro Mayorkas and the southern border as a bit of a problem, which, I'll be honest with you, Alejandro Mayorkas, he really was the wrong pick for that position. But they went ahead and did it. And finally, last but not least, Merrick Garland and the bias within the Department of Justice. So there are obviously, these are like the top 5, and there's plenty others where that came from. But these 5 are pretty much the top order of business. And the question that you have to ask yourself is whether or not McCarthy is actually going to allow these 5 to go through. I would imagine that January 6th, the committee trying to railroad everybody, and the investigation that the that the committee actually did is probably in there as well, just because of the fact that the Democrats tried to blame McCarthy and tried to bring him up on some interesting charges as well. So I'm sure that's on his list in particular for going and investigating. But one thing that has definitely been sort of interesting is the fact that, the Biden White House wants to still get some of their agenda items done. They've had some of their agenda items taken care of by a very favorable House and kind of a questionable Senate. But now that the House is supposedly going to be in the Republican control, we have a bit of a problem with Biden, because now supposedly Biden is getting ready to turn to executive actions as the Republicans take the House. In other words, rather than waiting for the House and the Senate to figure out laws to get his agenda taken care of, he has sort of hinted at, apparently, or at least his administration has hinted at, the fact that he is going to start using executive actions, similar to the whole idea of Obama with, I have a phone and I have a pen and I can rule this country with that. Now, if you remember correctly, I talked a little bit about executive orders not too long ago, thanks to a question from Buddy Weiser over on Rumble. And the thing about it is the executive orders can get challenged. They can definitely get challenged over things that are not part of his purview. The idea of executive orders were basically the administration of a particular law or governance that the legislature puts forth, that Congress puts forth. That's normally the way that executive orders work. However, in recent years, especially with FDR doing almost 3,800 of them, the executive orders have been looked at and looked upon as though they are law. So here's, this is a bit of a problem, because if you'll recall, he put out an executive order with regards to the student loan debt relief, and that is literally gone nowhere. And in fact, is going to go up to the Supreme Court here within the next couple of months as a part of it. All right. Now let me, I got to get back to I got new buttons that I've programmed. I've got new buttons to deal with. So anyway, all right. Let's see. My next set is actually in relation to the Twitter files. Now, I don't know if anybody knew, but we had, because of all the things that are happening in the House, we had another Twitter file dump happen in the last couple of days. And so, yeah, actually, that's a good question. Okay, so apparently I'm seeing in the chat here, I'm apparently seeing that the House has voted to adjourn, and which, to be honest with you, is wise. But why they returned at 8 and then voted to adjourn, all of that is dictated by that lady who's standing in for the speaker while this whole crap is going on. So to be honest with you, I think they were adjourning they adjourned earlier today to try and allow the Republicans to sort of get together in caucus and maybe work some crap out, and then hoping that if they came back together at 8 o'clock tonight, they would be able to have another vote. But it sounds like things are not going positively. And so, yeah, anyway. So yeah. The clerk, right. The clerk. I can't think of her name, but I know anyway. Okay, so back to the Twitter files real quick. The Twitter files, there was another dump. And, again, like I've said before on the multiple times that we've seen this, every single time there's a new dump, there's more evidence, more information, more damning evidence And this is no exception. So apparently in this latest Twitter dump, the FBI paid Twitter $3.4 million for banning users. And as a part of that, even more so, it's not just the FBI and the CIA and the ODNI and these organizations that have done this, but apparently Adam Schiff made requests directly to Twitter to ban users. So yeah, it's anyway, I just, this is just going to keep going and going and going. And so 2023 is definitely going to be an interesting year. I'm telling you folks right now, I've said it before and I'll say it again. The COVID pandemic, that was a historical event. Okay. The whole COVID thing. Now we're starting to see stuff come out about COVID. We have the Twitter files. We have the Biden laptop and Hunter Biden. We have the Epstein files and things like that, which, you know, the AG of the U.S. Virgin Islands getting fired after Biden, of course, was there, but because she was bringing a lawsuit to J.P. Morgan Chase. I talked about that a couple episodes ago. So, yeah, we are living in historic times. So we're just going to have to see if 2023 actually is a history making and change making year for this. But Twitter, the Twitter files, just for anybody's information, the Twitter files also has been, Matt Taibbi has been the main guy. Whoops. He's been the main guy who is been dumping the Twitter files along with Barry Weiss and a couple other people. And so there's sometimes you just have a hard time collecting all of it. Well, this is in the description. It's down at the very bottom before I give credit to my music stuff. But if you go into there and go to that, you'll go to and click and get that link and put it in your browser. You'll go to a Substack that Matt Taibbi has put together that has capsule summaries for all of the threads that have dumped so far. And so basically what he's done here is he's kind of consolidated, condensed it, so you don't have to read through all of the threads and everything else, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, so all of this stuff he's doing a really good job, in my opinion, with bringing this on. And just so people know, Matt Taibbi is not a right winger. In fact, if anything, he is more of a left-wing, a moderate left-wing Democrat. So this is actually really, really interesting to see him bringing all of this stuff out. And I think that's part of the reason why Elon Musk went ahead and you know, had him as one of the main 3 or 4 to go ahead and do that. So now, okay. So one of the things that happens with, or that is going on with the Twitter files is a potential lesson in what's going on. Now, everybody's focused on the Twitter files and the Twitter dumps and the whole thing about government suppressing free speech, which is extremely important. However, there was an opinion piece that came up in the Daily Caller that made me kind of think a little bit while I was looking at this. And the lesson that might be missed, according to the Matthew Peterson, the opinion writer, according to this, he is he's basically saying that there's a lesson that we might be missing. And I read through the whole thing, and just to kind of sum it up fairly quickly, please, again, go to the show notes, click on or grab the link and go look at it, read it for yourself. But one of the things that he is toying with, the idea in his opinion piece, has to deal with the fact that the midwits, that's what he calls them, middle, let me get the correct term here so I don't mess this up. The midwits are people like Joel Roth, who run, you know, trust and safety programs and human resources, among other things, at corporations across the county or across the country. And a midwit he defines as a middling, miseducated sort of person who unquestioningly goes along with the mainstream professional behavior and opinions. In other words, what he's trying to say is that we've created a generation, and society has created a generation where we have these people who are not following principled beliefs. They're following along to just kind of get along and to go along. And so they don't necessarily have their own separate opinions. They just follow whatever, CNN or MSNBC or any of those people just spew out. And in some cases, when these people get into positions of power, like Yoel Roth did, they create procedures within the company to make it easier for the company to just kind of follow along whatever the next latest and greatest thing is. And so his claim, Matthew Peterson's claim here, is that we're looking at this all wrong from the standpoint of, yes, the whole thing of the conservative movement and the whole thing dealing with the free speech aspect. Yes, that's important, but we're glossing over the more important issue, which is that we have a generation of folks who are in their, mid 20s to say early 40s, maybe late 30s, early 40s, that are all just basically have come out of these universities and institutions and everything else, that they just follow along. They've been essentially trained to follow without questioning anything. And, gosh forbid it goes against one of your principled behaviors rather than having the courage to stand up for your principles. They are actually just, they throw away their principles at all because it's the procedure that overtakes the principles. It's the process that is above the principles. And that's essentially what he's saying here. And I think he actually might be onto something with this because of the fact that, principled behavior, number one, is very difficult to do when you're doing it, because sometimes you're the only person standing alone. Like this broadcast was for a very long time before I started gaining a following. Standing up and speaking the truth is difficult. It's hard to do. But when you have people who can come along with you and help bolster you, it becomes a lot easier. The problem is that you have to be that first person to stand up. You have to be the first person to call it out. And, Clarence Thomas has made a comment that, doing what's right is more important than just going along, and that even, and I'm paraphrasing completely here, but, doing what's right is important, even if you're the only person standing there. And that's the part that's missing in the following generations, is the fact that the whole idea of standing on principle is no longer celebrated. What is celebrated is going along with the crowd, following like lemmings. And in some cases, like they were talking about the new hive mind or the new Borg, if you're a Star Trek person. But anyway, so the point that he brings up in this opinion, I think, is very, very poignant and should definitely be considered and looked at as far as that goes. All right. So I'm about halfway through the program. So let's take a second. Take a drink. And let's go ahead and celebrate as soon as I can here.
Please check your mailbox. A new message has arrived.
All right. This week's Pet of the Week was submitted actually prior to the Christmas break. But this individual said, here, I'm going to submit this person or this, and you just use it whenever you are, whenever you get to it kind of thing. So this is from W. Grow over on Rumble. And I think I've seen him in the chat here. I've seen him there. But let me go ahead and switch over, and I know I've got to get rid of this, but I want you to meet. They are littermates, brothers in arms. And for those of you who are older than, say, 45, you might remember a pair of comedic geniuses that had a lot of time on screen smoking dope. I introduce to you Cheech and Chong. Here's their story. So this is the last set of littermates we have. Evidently, my wife can't just get one pet at a time. I hear you. I understand. Got it. All right. This is Cheech and Chong, and they didn't name them. Okay. Cheech is the one in the front and is a girl, and Chong is behind her and is a boy. They are Russian blue Maine Coon mixes. Wow, you can really see the Maine Coon in the face. You can really see that kind of showing up, and some of the coloring. They were abandoned by their mother at about 4 weeks old. My daughter's friend took them in and bottle fed them until they could eat solid food. Unfortunately, this girl's roommate was very allergic to cats, so they had to be restricted to the bedroom. She was trying to find a better home for them with no luck up until they were approximately 4 months old. So she spent a lot of time doing that. So it came down to the point where if they didn't find someone to take them by the end of the day, that they were going to have to go to the shelter. And of course, W. Gro's wife wouldn't allow that. Again, I understand. So they came to their house and have been there for just over a year and counting. And that's Cheech and Chong's story. They are beautiful animals. You know, some people fall into the camp of being a cat dog person or a dog person. I'm actually just an animal person because I have cats, dogs, and horses. I've had guinea pigs, or not guinea pigs, hamsters, birds, you know, and that kind of stuff. So I'm more of an animal person. Okay. But I will pretty much go with just about anybody as far as animals are concerned. I love all animals. All right. So that is tonight's pet of the week. If you would like to have your pet featured as a pet of the week, do me a favor. Send me an email to fans. That's Foxtrot Alpha November Sierra. That's spelled phonetically. So FANS at whiskeymusings.online. Once again, that's fans at whiskeymusings.online. It's the same email address. You can also send me questions for Saturday night's Questions for Whiskey, which, hint, hint, I am out of. I don't have any questions for whiskey for Saturday. So if you'd like to send me a question or send me your pet's photo, send me an email, send me a picture, and obviously some background information, and we'll get your pet on for Pet of the Week, which occurs here on Wednesdays when I remember or don't have a really, really hugely full schedule for it. But anyway, all right. So that was the Pet of the Week. And thank you, WGrow508, for submitting Cheech and Chong for that little segment. I do appreciate it. And I know most of my watchers and listeners do too. Okay. So, let me see. Where am I at here? On the Hunter Biden laptop. So apparently, there is a lawsuit going on because the Department of Justice, surprise, surprise, is having difficulty finding documents on Hunter Biden. Well, particularly Hunter Biden's laptop. So take a look at this piece from the Post Millennial. Apparently let me get it up here. Apparently the Department of Justice is now being sued because they have drugged their feet on a FOIA request with regards to the Hunter Biden laptop. And lawyers for the federal government apparently admitted in court originally, that they have close to 400 pages or more of what they call potentially responsive documents. But now, after saying, hey, we have a lot of information, now all of a sudden they can't seem to find it. And they can neither confirm nor deny the existence of the same documents that they claimed that they have in court. And so the petitioner, Kevin Evans, sued the DOJ in March after allegedly failing to comply with his request under the Freedom of Information Act for records relating to, quote, any relationship, communications, gifts, or any remuneration in any form between the Bidens and China, Russia, or Ukraine, according to a report from the Daily Mail. Now, lawyers for the federal government had admitted in court to having at least 400 pages of potentially responsive documents, but are now claiming that they can neither confirm nor deny the existence of the documents in question. According to Evans, he said that they eventually produced about 60 pages of documents, but they're basically all letters from senators and congressmen asking about Hunter. So in other words, it's sort of like a very broad Google search where you just put in Hunter Biden and you get everything. And letters from the DOJ back to the senators and congressmen about it. Then Evans claims also then towards the end of the last year, they said, well, we have these 400 pages of potentially responsive documents. We need to review them. Evans was told by lawyers, and it's a similar statement to the one that the government had stated in court. So in March, he filed a suit, and before the magistrate judge, Michael Haggerty, they made the same representation. They've done a thorough search and they've uncovered 400 potentially responsive documents, Evans said. After stalling for a few months, the government then claimed that they could neither confirm nor deny their existence. So it's basically in court now, and the next status hearing for the case is scheduled for January 9th, which is coming up in just 5 days. So yeah, come on. This is getting really ridiculous that these people are trying to hide this whole thing. We know the laptop's real. We know what they did, so on and so forth. And yeah. And so the government is just trying to cover up for Joe Biden. And speaking about government covering up for Joe Biden and Hunter Biden's connection and the connections between them. Breitbart reported this here on yesterday. They reported it yesterday. The White House once again dodges Joe Biden's involvement in the family business after they previously denied that he did not get involved. And so apparently, Karine Jean-Pierre just totally ignored the question from our buddy Peter Doocy. Peter Doocy, I'm telling you, the Deuce man has been holding these people feet to the fire. I highly respect that guy, really. But his question was, the House Oversight Committee is laying out their new investigations, and they claim to have evidence that Joe Biden lied to the American people about his involvement in his family's business schemes. Side note, when has Joe Biden not lied? He's been caught so many times lying. I don't even think the guy knows what the truth is anymore. Okay, back to the piece. Peter Doocy prefaced that question, and then he says, simply, did he? Did he lie to the American people about his involvement in his family's business scheme? And Karine Jean-Pierre, of course, dodged the question by stating that Republicans are ignoring their pledge to reduce Joe Biden's soaring inflation and have instead focused on the Biden family business. Yeah. So in other words, she just didn't bother to answer the question, which is funny. Again, part partially, I don't envy her position. I don't envy anybody who's in the press secretary's position, because when you have somebody who is like Joe Biden, it's very, very difficult to keep all of the lies straight. And it's also very difficult to keep walking back things that Joe Biden says. So I don't necessarily envy her in her job, but she has got to be probably one of the worst press secretaries we've had, at least in modern history, because she is absolutely horrible at lying and trying to cover things up and what do you call it? Deflect. That's what I'm thinking. Deflect for what's going on. So anyway, more to come on that. Of course, we've got more out there about Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. And, Joe was the big guy. I mean, let's be honest with you. Joe's the big guy. So anyway. In fact, somebody even floated the idea that potentially McCarthy will do everything in his power to cover up some of that, which is part of the reason why the 20 or 19 or 20 Republicans are not wanting to vote him in as speaker, because according to Joe Biden, he and McCarthy are really good friends. Not a ringing endorsement for that. Okay. So one of the things that I definitely do want to bring up, because we've been talking a lot about like how, if the United States were to dissolve, how would that breakup happen? And a lot of people are saying, oh, well, you could just have the red states, all the people who are conservatives, they could just move to the red states. And then you have all of the people who are, liberal leftist lunatics, they can all go to the blue states, and the blue states will separate and the red states will just, go down in flames. If you listen to a leftist who believes that the blue states are subsidizing the red states and so on and so forth, goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. One of the things that is going on here on the West Coast, because everybody talks about the West Coast being the left coast, that's what they call it. And you have all of the people who are like, oh, well, let's just build a wall across the border of Washington, Oregon, and California and just let them, fall into the sea. Well, one of the problems with that, and I've brought this up on this show multiple times, is that it's not as clear cut as that. In particular, my home state here, and I use the term home loosely, but my home state here is the state of Washington. The state of Washington, while we have a very diverse environment, meaning that the west side is mostly wet and the east side of the mountains is mostly kind of dry, high desert, we have that same kind of separation in terms of red versus blue. The problem that we have in Washington, Oregon, and California, all three of us, and New York, come to find out, all of these states have, is that they're considered blue states. But the reason why they're considered blue states is because of the fact that the most populous areas of those states are actually around the urban centers. And this is part of the reason why I've made the claim and said it multiple times on this program, that this is not a red state, blue state. This is a urban versus rural conflict for our culture, because the urban centers generally tend to lean blue if they're not outright blue. And you can see that across the United States. San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, LA, New York, Chicago, all of those cities, even in Texas, you have Austin, Dallas, Houston, all of those cities, they are relatively blue, or at the very least purple in most cases. Whereas the rural counties generally tend to be more conservative, have more religious values, have more of the conservative, the type of typical conservative values that you would think of, or the conservative types of people. And so This is why I always get into a bit of a conniption when people say, oh, let's just cut off, Washington, Oregon, and California and just throw them all away. Because generally speaking, especially on the coast, the mountain ranges actually sort of define, for the most part, the divide between the left and the right within the state. Well, there's a movement afoot that is looking to actually help and break apart, in particular in Oregon, the whole idea of Oregon being a blue state. And let me go ahead and, let me bring this up. So several of these counties in Oregon have actually been voting within the county as to whether or not they want to join Idaho in this whole idea of seceding from the state of Oregon and going to Idaho. Now, a lot of people saw this and have looked at this. They start laughing about this because they think, oh, the states are already made up and everything else, and there's nothing that can be done. Well, in actuality, states have changed their boundaries in the past. In particular, if you look at things like Virginia and West Virginia, Virginia actually used to be the entire encompass both Virginia and West Virginia, and West Virginia actually petitioned and received approval to go ahead and become their own state at one point. The same thing has occurred in a couple of other states throughout time where they have moved the border slightly over time within or between the two states. And the reason being is obviously, borders are basically just imaginary lines drawn on a map, realistically. But the key here, though, is that it's not unheard of for a state to actually change. Now, it would be a bigger hurdle if they were wanting to become their own state. But because of the fact that they're moving or wanting to join Idaho and create a greater Idaho as a state, and so our states are not changing, our actual numbers of states are not changing, it becomes a little bit more of a procedural administrative matter than it is so much of a huge hullabaloo that could cause some problems. Well, apparently 12 counties have done it now. So Wallowa actually becomes the 12th Oregon county to seek secession to Idaho. And there has been talk of Washington having parts of Washington actually do the exact same thing. But unfortunately, Idaho has its standards, believe it or not, and they are not as willing to allow Washington to go in. Let me kind of show you what I mean. So here, this is in particular to the Oregon thing, this graphic. As you notice, the red area is counties that have voted to join Idaho. The green county is Wallowa, which we now know has voted to join Idaho as well. The gray counties have yet to vote on it. Now, the yellow borderline that you see around there is what Greater Idaho would actually become once that happened. Now, there's a lot of conversation as to how this works. And the funny thing is that as the counties vote to join Idaho, Idaho also has to vote to allow them to join the state. And believe it or not, so far, all of these counties that have since voted, Idaho has actually said, yeah, we're more than willing to let you in. And this is part of the problem why Washington has not been included in this. Washington has had votes in the past like that. The problem is, though, that Washington and Washington's counties, actually all of the population within Washington's counties matches Idaho's counties, or Idaho, the entire state, in terms of the population. And so if that were to happen, if Washington was supposed to move over there, they could potentially have a problem where Idaho, instead of being a red state, could potentially move into being more of a purple state. And that's counterintuitive to where the Idahoans, I think that's how it's pronounced, where the Idahoans want to go. They want to stay a solid red state. And so looking at things like past voting history and stuff like that are things that Idaho is considering as they think about where these counties are coming in. There's a formula that they've been using with this, and it's all explained on this website right here. But there's a formula that basically has shown that Washington has a chance of voting Republican in terms of like a 1.3 factor, whereas Eastern Oregon has had a chance of voting Republican at a 2.7 factor. Well, 2.7 is greater than 1.3. And so that's one of the main driving reasons why Idaho is actually looking at Oregon and saying, hey, Oregon would be pretty cool. Eastern Oregon would be pretty cool to bring this up. Now, the interesting thing about this is that all this would do is just move the Oregon border over with where Idaho is at, and you would have Greater Idaho. You can see up in the upper left-hand corner of the screen here. You can see how that would scoot over. And then that would add or make, Boise obviously would now be in the center of the state rather than being close to the border. But there's also some talk. So this is the first phase in the map here. So this is phase 1. And then there is talk of them doing phase 2, where they actually go all the way across Oregon and take some of the coastline, and then also include some counties from California, from Northern California, as a part of Greater Idaho. Now, I don't know if they'll actually make it past phase 1. But, this is certainly interesting. Now, there's another aspect to this as well. This kind of gives a little bit better picture of the phases of Oregon. And you can actually see, if you look at Oregon's, this map, because this map is typographical, if you look at the typographical map here, you can see this yellow line for Greater Oregon Phase 1 actually runs along the mountains. And that's exactly what I've been telling people, is that Eastern Washington, Eastern Oregon, Eastern California generally tend to vote Republican or vote red and conservative. Everything on the west side of those 3 states, which are the more populous parts of those states, you end up with essentially the entire state is driven by a small part of the state itself. This is exactly what democracy is about. And this is why this is a perfect example as to why we do not want to get rid of the Electoral College. Because what happens in the states of Washington, Oregon, and California would happen to the entire country. A small part of the population would actually dictate to everyone else within the country. All of those flyover states that they joke about on the leftist side, everything in the middle of the country would just get overruled by New York, San Francisco, and LA. And that is not what we want. So this is a perfect example as to why the Electoral College is so important. Now, the funny thing about it is the people that run this Greater Idaho project, they actually offer up a potential solution for Washington that is being looked at over in New York State. And this I actually found kind of interesting. I know it's kind of hard maybe to read, but there is a movement that is proposing a New York State constitutional amendment to actually divide the state into what they call 3 autonomous regions, where it's one continuous state at the federal level, but at the local level or the state level, it's actually divided up into 3 separate sections. And so this is kind of an interesting concept. I don't know how... constitutionally, there really isn't anything that would prevent it because, of course, we're talking about the 10th Amendment here. But this would be interesting to see and to have happen in a lot of these states like California, Oregon, Washington, and New York, where you have one central government that is able to run roughshod over everything. And here in Washington, it's happened multiple times. We built a brand new stadium. The west side said, yeah, let's do it. Let's use tax dollars to build the brand new stadium. And the east side of the mountains all said no. Well, because the population of the west side overrides the population of the east side of the mountains, we ended up with a new stadium in Seattle. So, but again, this is kind of an interesting thing. I'm going to have to sort of keep an eye on this just to kind of see what happens. Same thing with the whole Idaho thing. But yeah, this is just something that we're going to have to keep an eye on. I never really had heard about this whole idea of dividing a state into 3 or more separate contiguous regions. But considering the fact that our federalist system, the true federalist system, would actually function better in that kind of a sense, then, I think it would actually work. I think it could. But anyway, so there's that for you. And that's going to be interesting to watch and see how that happens. It's sort of the same. I mean, I kind of see it as sort of the same as the whole idea of a convention of states. It's moving really, really, really freaking slow for everything. Oh, speaking of cats. All right, this is... Oh, if you remember, oh, come on, turn. So this is actually our barn cat, Badger, and he's obviously a bit shy. But you recall maybe a few episodes ago, I brought out Cleo. Well, this is our male Tom that is, ouch. That's our male Tom that is our barn cat. He's an indoor-outdoor cat. So anyway, there you go. Special pet of the week. All right. So another thing, as I look at my time here, another thing that he is cute, but I'm going to tell you right now, Bonnie, his claws and teeth are so extremely sharp that even if he is, quote, playing with you and not meaning to hurt you, he still hurts you. Anyway. So, okay. So let me, I want to bring up a couple of things. Something that in particular, something that I saw pop. I did not know this, but apparently there is a new law that has a mandatory safety device that Biden signed into law. And let me go ahead and bring this up. This is interesting. I didn't even realize that this was a law, but apparently buried in the Democrats' 2021 infrastructure bill is a measure that is designed, of course, according to the Western Journal, which is a right-leaning outlet, I'll admit, that is designed to take away a little bit more of our freedom away. And he signed the bill in November of 2021. What this safety device is being sold as is a measure to prevent drunk driving. And they're essentially going to force every new car maker to add to every new vehicle starting in 2026 a device that is a remote kill switch that could allow the government, the police, and car makers to disable your car from the comfort of their offices to prevent you from using it. In other words, it'd kind of be like the whole Tesla thing. I don't know if anybody remembers, but there was an article about Tesla being able to disable their car for things like non-payment. Because Teslas have an uplink that is, designed and intended for like software updates and things like that. It basically allows the police and the government to deny you the use of your personal property in your car. Now, as always, Benjamin Franklin kind of made this comment: those who give away liberty in the under the guise of security actually deserve neither. I'm paraphrasing that, of course, because I don't think that's the exact quote, but the principle still applies. And so here, they apparently, the language, surprise, surprise, within the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is somewhat vague in the fact that it doesn't describe what the device will actually be able to do, and if it doubles as a monitoring device outside of the legislation, and then, of course, how and when it can be used against citizens. So there's some serious questions with regards to things like our Fourth Amendment and Sixth Amendment, I believe, Fourth and Sixth. I can think of at least, preventing people from going on terms of like limiting our freedom, and then, of course, personal privacy nightmares as well. But I guess on the bill, it says that on page 135 of the bill, the device must, quote, passively monitor the performance of a driver of a motor vehicle to accurately identify whether that driver may be impaired and prevent or limit motor vehicle operation if an impairment is detected. And they're also called out to be mandatory. So, yeah. This is really, really interesting. But apparently it's already been signed. I mean, back in 2021 in November. So yeah, just, once again, the Democrats and honestly, I keep saying it's the Democrats, but now I'm starting to think more and more, it's essentially the elite versus the smellies, and the smellies are essentially us. Okay. There's a couple other articles here. One in particular that I want to bring up. This one, I've been saying on this program that the Hunter Biden laptop story being suppressed was probably the greatest, nationwide, influence on the 2020 election. Well, apparently there is a, report in the Epoch Times. The Epoch Times is reporting on the report that came out from an election watchdog in Wisconsin that shows that 150,000 votes in the 2020 election were not actually tied to a valid physical address in Wisconsin. And one of the things that this, apparently what they found is that there were people who, well, first of all, there's a person in the article that basically says that they lived in Tennessee. They had been living in Tennessee, and they found out that they actually voted in the 2020 election in Wisconsin. So that just that one individual thing is just alone to, scare the bejesus out of you, just that one incident. But apparently they found 45,000, 45,000 of such occurrences involving people who were living out of state during the November 3rd ballot, with another 107,000 documented instances on the part of voters who moved to another address within the state and cast a ballot in a different jurisdiction from the one in which they actually reside. So that essentially is over 150,000 votes cast in the 2020 presidential election that cannot be tied to a valid address. And that is illegal in the state of Wisconsin. Okay. Now, they do claim that there might be a reasonable explanation for most of them. But the number of instances, meaning the 150,000, is so large that if only 2 out of 10, so that's 1/5 of the votes that were done this way, were actually truly nefariously cast, that number was enough to tip the election in Wisconsin for Biden. So here we are, and we're talking about election fraud. We're talking about, 2020 and having a illegitimate president in the White House today. And now we have essentially Election Watch, a Wisconsin election integrity watchdog organization, has essentially found proof at least in one instance, where there is a highly likely possibility that the election went to Biden, or what and some people call him the basement dummy, where it should have gone for Trump. So now we have something, at least in terms of the proof. I think that this kind of action, things with the Dominion voting machines and that kind of stuff, let's just call them technical glitches for the moment, but the Dominion voting machines and other voting machine problems. And then you have on top of all that, the Hunter Biden laptop story and those things being suppressed, and those things all combined would be enough, I think, to tip the election in what is essentially the wrong way. Now, do I honestly think that we can go back and change this? No, I don't. But the reality of it is that we need to clean up a lot of this stuff in the face of 2024, for sure. But anyway, so there's that article in there. And then another thing caught my eye, in particular, when we're talking about the economy. This is also from the Epic Times, and this kicks off that it's possible that we could be looking again at $100 for crude oil in 2023. And the oil and gas prices are expected to have another bullish year, they say. Well, that's because of the fact that they're planning on pushing up the crude prices above, back again at $100 a barrel. And here we are sitting on our domestic oil, and we could easily be pumping it right now and bringing that price down. But Biden refuses to take care of this in terms of helping us out, helping Americans out. Biden is refusing to take care of this particular situation. All right. There's a couple other articles that popped also in regards to gun control laws. Alabama now allows concealed carry without a permit, which is going to be interesting to watch their crime rate, because I've pointed out on multiple occasions that the power of deterrence is a huge advantage. And so like Kennesaw, Georgia, and one other place, I think in Alabama, actually found out that when you make it to where the mere hint of a possibility that a burglar might run across an armed homeowner, the desire to burglarize homes goes down. The same thing is involved with things like wanting to pick fights with people. If that person happens to be larger than you, you are less likely to get into the fight with them than somebody who might be smaller than you. And that ultimately is the power of deterrence. And so realistically, Alabama is now opening up that door, and it's going to be interesting to watch over the course of the next couple of years, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, to see if they follow the same trend that most other places that have instituted things like open carry, constitutional carry, etc., that the crime rate actually starts going down because of the fact that people start behaving themselves a lot more. Okay. And yeah, let me just see real quick. Oh, the other gun control law the other gun control article that I pulled up that's in the show notes has to deal with New York's latest gun control law has been deemed unconstitutional by the New York Supreme Court. And now this particular one has to deal with a red flag law that essentially was allowing for the police to just take away someone's guns if they were deemed a risk. So it's called the Extreme Risk Protection Order Law, lets individuals, including police officers, petition a court to allow the seizure of firearms from a person they believe poses a threat to themselves and others. So the key point in this is that they don't have to have proof. They don't have to have a warrant. They don't have to have anything. It could just be supposition. Somebody thinks that they're a danger or they pose a threat to themselves or others, and you could petition the court to have their weapons taken away. And so the New York Supreme Court basically said, yeah, no, that's not going to fly. And this law, apparently the original law, the Extreme Risk Protection Order law, took effect in 2019 and has led to the issuance of more than 1,900 removal orders. But it's in violation, according to the New York Supreme Court, it's in violation of the 2nd and 14th Amendment because it does not, quote, sufficiently protect a citizen's rights. Well, I mean, things are starting to turn. So maybe 2023 might be a good year for us conservatives and those who believe in America and in our constitutional rights. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my final Whiskey Musings thought for the evening. Do me a favor, if you like the program and you like what I do, head on over to Rumble, sign up if you don't already have an account there, but hit subscribe and follow me. Follow me on my social media. The social media is popping up right here. And, you know, keep an eye open for updates and things like that. I will be transmitting Saturday night again, but Saturday night is an hour later than my Wednesday night show. So Saturday night is at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, and we'll see you all then on the Whiskey Musings broadcast. Good night, everybody.